A firm evaluates all of its projects by applying the IRR rule. If the required return is 16%, should the firm accept the following project? We have a time zero cash outflow of $19,500, a year one cash inflow of $9,800, a year two inflow of $10,300, and a year three inflow of $8,600. To calculate our internal rate of return, we can use our financial calculator or Excel, but absent either one of those, we'll need to go with a trial by error approach. First, we'll guess an interest rate. Let's calculate the present values at a 10% interest rate. The 19,500 times zero cash flows present value is simply 19,500. The year one cash flow will discount back at 10% for one period and get a present value of $8,909. The year two cash flow would be discounted back at 10% for two periods for a present value of $8,512. The year three cash flow of $8,600 would be discounted back at 10% for three periods for a present value of $6,461. The next step is to sum the cash flows over years, the present value of the cash flows in years 1 through 3. We get a present value of $23,883. To calculate the net present value, we take the present value of $23,883 and subtract the initial cost of $19,500. We get a net present value of $4,383. A positive net present value means we need to guess at a higher interest rate. Let's try a 20% interest rate. Again, the time zero cash flow's present value is simply the time zero cash flow, $19,500. The time one cash flow of $9,800 needs to be discounted back for one period at 20%. The time two cash flow of $10,300 needs to be discounted back at 20% for two periods. The time three cash flow needs to be discounted back at 20% for three periods. When we sum the present value of the cash flows in years 1 through 3, we get a total present value of $20,296. When we subtract the initial cost, we calculate a net present value of $796. We're getting closer, but our interest rate is still a bit too low. Let's try a 25% interest rate. At a 25% interest rate, we'll go ahead and calculate the present value of all those cash flows. The sum of the cash flows, present values for years 1 through 3, is $18,835. When we subtract the initial cost of $19,500, we get a net present value of negative $665. This means the 25% interest rate is too high, and we would want to try a slightly lower guess. We would keep continuing on this process by trial and error until we happened upon the interest rate of 22.64%. Because at 22.64%, the sum of the present value of the cash flows in years 1, 2, and 3, that is the $7,991, plus the $6,848, plus the $4,662, exactly equals our project cost of $19,500. So the net present value is 0. This means that our internal rate of return for our project is 22.64%. If the firm had a required rate of return of 16%, since our internal rate of return, or IRR, is greater than our required rate of return, we would accept the project. A second way of calculating this is using the Excel function equals IRR. We would type in equals IRR and then the cash flows at time 0, 1, 2, and 3. Alternatively, we could enter cell references that contained those cash flows, and we would get the same internal rate of return of 22.64%. If we don't want to use Excel, if we want to use our financial calculator, and if we don't want to go with a trial by error approach, we can use, if we have a TI 83 or 84, the internal rate of return function. The form of this function is as follows: IRR, parenthesis, enter the time 0 cash outflow, followed by a comma, then a bracket, followed by the cash inflows over years 1 through 3, with a closed bracket, followed by a closed parenthesis. Once we press App and return to the Finance menu, we can solve to get 22.64%.